Imagine a world where the air feels older than the ground beneath it. A world without cities, without iron, without stories carved into stone. Just hills and rivers and silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until you forget there was ever sound. You probably wouldn't last a day there. No phone, no shoes, no bread, unless you spent the week grinding grain by hand, and even then you'd probably burn it. But back then, people knew things in their bones, not because someone told them, but because they lived long enough to remember. And they whispered stories, quiet ones, dangerous ones, about a time when they came down. Not they, like bandits or travelers, not even enemies. These were different. Older, taller maybe, certainly not like us. Some say they fell from the sky. Others say they simply stepped down. No flash, no wings, no grand speech, just a decision made from above to be with us. And from that strange wrong pairing, something else came, something neither earth nor heaven was quite ready for. You'll hear the word whispered in the old books, Nephilim, just once or twice. But once you know it's there, it lingers. You can feel it in the soil, in the way ancient people built their doors too tall and their walls too thick, as if expecting visitors who didn't fit through normal spaces. You probably wouldn't ask questions if one of them passed by. You just look at the ground and try not to breathe too loud. But that's much later. The story doesn't start with giants. It starts with a glance. One moment everything is still. The next, someone is watching, not from the trees, not from the edge of a hill, from above. Now you and I would probably notice if someone was watching us from a cloud, but in the beginning, no one knew to be afraid of the sky. The watchers, if you can call them that, weren't supposed to touch. They were meant to observe, perhaps guide, but certainly not marry. That was the rule, the oldest rule, and the first one to be broken. It said that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and took them as wives. No details. Just that. Just one line in a very old book, but behind it, a ripple that would never fully settle. You can imagine the confusion at first, people pretending nothing strange had happened, mothers trying to hush their children when they asked why those men didn't blink quite right, or why the shadows stretched longer around them. And then came the children. They were big, but not in the way toddlers are big when you haven't slept. They were off. Their eyes held something too old, their hands grasped too tightly, and the way they looked at the horizon, like they were remembering something from before the sun. You wouldn't put them in timeout. Let's just say that. It didn't take long before people stopped calling them children. They had names, and names become legends. Some called them kings, others monsters. But the word that stuck, the one people mumbled under their breath, was still the same: Nephilim. You didn't say it unless you had to, and if you did, you didn't look up afterward. They didn't all grow into tyrants. That's important to say. Some just existed. But even that was enough, because imagine living next to someone who could pull a tree out by the roots at age 5, someone who could crush stone and smile while doing it, someone who dreamed in languages that hadn't been invented yet. It's not the size that frightened people. It was the sense that they shouldn't be here. And honestly, they probably felt that too. Like guests at a dinner party where the walls were too small and no one made eye contact. They broke things without meaning to. And when they meant to, it was worse. Still, they weren't the only thing broken. Because if you looked around, you'd notice something strange. The world itself had started to bend, quietly, slowly, like a branch holding too much weight. It's like when the ground beneath your house shifts just enough that the doors start sticking, but no one thinks to check the foundation, not until the walls start to crack. And the world, the whole world, had started to crack. People were more violent. That's how the old texts put it, at least. but they don't say why. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was jealousy. Or maybe it was because when you live in the shadow of something that shouldn't exist, you start doing things you shouldn't do. Some say the Nephilim taught secrets they weren't meant to share, knowledge too sharp for human hands. Things like metalwork, sorcery, the art of war. But no one agrees on the details, and the truth has been drowned in too many old scrolls and theories to see clearly anymore. Still, the effect was real. People stopped trusting. Then they stopped talking. Then they started killing. And slowly, day by day, what had once been a quiet world, unshaped and slow, began to rumble with footsteps too large, and words too loud, and choices too cruel. You can picture it, can't you? Farms burned because someone's child grew too fast. A father vanishing into the hills because he saw one of them and didn't want to be seen back. A mother pretending her baby wasn't taller than her by age 6. Everyone pretending. Until the pretending couldn't hold any more. The ground got tired of holding its breath. The sky got tired of watching. And somewhere, far above it all, someone else had been watching too. But not in awe. Not like the watchers. This was different. This was grief. And eventually, a decision. You can continue down a path like that for only so long, before something gives. And in this case, it was everything. Because according to the story, the God who had shaped the world, the one who had whispered galaxies into place and set stars spinning for fun, saw it all. Saw the violence. Saw the fear. Saw what had been done with the gift of life. And it says, he regretted it. Not in the petty way we regret ordering the wrong sandwich. Not in the tired way we regret waking up late. In the deep aching way that you regret handing a match to a child in a dry house. The word used in the ancient Hebrew is closer to sorrow. He was grieved, heartbroken, and not just at the world, but at the humans, the very ones he'd made in his image. So the flood didn't come out of rage. That's the part people miss when they tell the story too fast. It came out of heartbreak. You don't send rain like that unless something inside you is broken too. Because it didn't start with a storm. It started with silence. That kind of eerie, stretched silence that presses into your chest. Like the moment before a curtain drops, or the moment before someone says, "I'm sorry, but..." And in that silence, one man was building a boat. Not by the sea, not even near a river, really, just in a field. A ridiculous place to build anything meant to float. People laughed. Of course they did. You probably would have too. A giant wooden box with no rudder, no sail, no reason. But Noah, that was his name, kept building anyway. He was different. That's what the story says. Blameless, they call him. Not perfect, not glowing, just good. Which by then was rare enough to be interesting. He worked quietly, day after day, plank after plank. And all around him, the world cracked louder. Some say the Nephilim watched him, that they stood on nearby hills, arms crossed, eyes narrow. Others say they laughed, mocked, maybe even helped him cut wood once or twice, if only to see what he thought he was doing. Even they must have felt it. The shift. The waiting. It was too quiet. Too still. And then, one morning, a raindrop. Just one. Enough to make someone glance up, blink, and say, "That's odd." Then another, and another, until the air wasn't quiet anymore. It was full of water. You've probably heard the story by now, or at least the version they give kids. Animals in pairs, giraffes peeking out of windows, a rainbow and a dove, and a leaf held gently in a beak. But the real story isn't soft. It's the sound of forests snapping like twigs, of mountains becoming islands, of people knocking on wood too late. And somewhere, in the water or beneath it, the Nephilim disappeared. Or so we're told. But here's the thing. The flood was supposed to end them, wipe the slate, wash away the wrong. But if that were true, why do they show up again later? The rain stops. Not all at once, but slowly. Like the sky got tired. You step out of the boat and your foot sinks into soft earth. It smells like the end of everything and the beginning of something you don't yet understand. There's mud on your ankles, silence in your ears, and something like relief, or maybe just exhaustion, sitting on your chest. No more giants, no more watchers, no more of those children that looked too old in the face and too strong in the hands. The Nephilim are gone. At least, that's what you hope. You start walking again, planting, building, naming things. The world feels smaller now, softer. The ground doesn't shake when someone walks by anymore. You can sleep without dreaming of footsteps that never stop. Generations pass, and now you've come to the edge again, but this time with a leader. His name is Moses, and he's brought you through deserts and storms, through hunger and thunder, all the way here, to the border of a land that was promised long before your grandfather's grandfather was born. You stand at the edge, and the wind smells like grapes, dust, and something old. Moses chooses 12 men, one from each tribe. You watch them disappear into the hills. They're gone 40 days, and when they come back, they look like they've seen ghosts. But not pale, whispering ones. Big ones, loud ones. "We saw them," one of them says, not even looking you in the eyes. You know what he means before he says the word. They're still there, he tells you, tall as trees, stronger than memory. Another one steps forward. He's holding a cluster of grapes so big it drags behind him like a sack of treasure. They live in fortified cities, he says, walls up to heaven. And then the whisper, Nephilim. Someone else says they looked like the children of Anak. Says their footsteps shook the earth. Says, we looked like grasshoppers next to them, and they saw us that way too. And you believe them, even though you shouldn't, even though the flood was supposed to be the end, even though Moses is standing right there, because some things don't stay buried, not even under a world of water. You keep walking, because what else can you do? The giants, if that's really what they are, aren't chasing you, not yet. They don't need to. They have cities, walls, thrones. You pass through valleys where the rocks feel disturbed, like something once fell here, something huge. The grass grows strange in these places, too thick in one spot, too thin in another. You don't mention it. You keep walking. And the names, that's what really stays with you. The names of the people who live here. None of those names sound like anything your grandmother ever used. The Anakim are tall. Everyone agrees on that. The kind of tall that makes you adjust your posture just to be near them. People say they're descended from the Nephilim. Whether it's true or not, you don't ask. The Rephaim are worse. Not because they're taller, but because some say they aren't entirely alive. You pass a region called Bashan, and someone points to a fortress on a distant hill. That's Og's land, they whisper. King Og. You've heard of him. Everyone has. They say he sleeps in an iron bed more than 13 feet long. They say it had to be measured, just so people would believe it existed. They say he ruled over 60 cities, and some say he was the last of them, the last of the Rephaim. You try not to look at the bed too long. Try not to wonder who it was built for. Try not to wonder who else might still need one. You reach the edge of the valley of Hinnom, and the air feels thick. No giants here, not anymore, but the silence is familiar. You remember it from before the flood, and it's there, standing between stones older than memory, that you realize something. The giants, the Nephilim, the Anakim, the Rephaim, they don't just walk through history like tall men in long shadows. They sink in. They settle into the soil. Their names become borders. Their bones become bedrock. And even when they're gone, the land remembers. You do too, even when no one else will say the name out loud anymore. You remember. There's something strange about the way people talk around here. You notice it after a while. They'll mention a village, but not who built it. They'll name a mountain, but not who named it. And when you ask, they just say, "That's old land. From before." From before. That's what they always say. Before the war. Before the stories. Before the ones with long arms and no patience. You're not sure what they mean exactly, but you've started saying it too. It makes things easier. You stop asking why some stones look like they were carved for hands too large, or why some doorways are twice the height of a camel, or why some of the people here, the ones who stay quiet and carry water like it's nothing, don't quite meet your eyes. It's better not to ask, because here's the truth you've started to suspect. The giants didn't just vanish. They bled into names, into families, into faces that look normal until they don't. They say he was the one who spoke first, who convinced the others, who stood under the stars and made them swear they'd go through with it, together. Because even angels, apparently, fear being alone in their rebellion. They didn't just take women. That part you knew already. They taught things, secrets, forbidden knowledge. Some say they taught humans how to make weapons, how to sharpen blades and mine metal and start fires that couldn't be put out. Others say they taught charms, enchantments, the reading of signs in the stars, and how to bend them. The Watchers weren't just falling in love. They were handing out fire, and the humans, they took it, greedily, like children handed knives. You wouldn't have questioned it, not at the time. Why would you? Someone shows you how to craft a sword, or paint your eyes with crushed minerals, or twist words into power. You don't say no. But something in the world changed after that. You could feel it. The ground grew restless, the skies more silent. And then, their children were born. You know what they were called, the same name you've heard before, the same name that still lingers in your jaw when you grind your teeth at night. Nephilim. You weren't there when the sky changed. Not visibly. There was no fire, no lightning, just silence. But it was different this time. Not the usual quiet, not the kind that settles before a flood or follows a long march. This one felt heavy, like it was waiting for something. Like the breath before a verdict, because things had gotten out of hand. The Nephilim were growing, in size, in power, in appetite. Some say they began to consume the very people who raised them. Others say they turned on each other, that the world beneath their feet became too small to hold their pride. And above them, heaven was watching, no longer curious, no longer tolerant. Angels don't fear easily. But something in heaven grew cold, and for the first time since the Watchers fell, there was movement. You wouldn't have seen it, but you'd have felt it. The wind shifts. The animals go still. The sky turns that color it gets just before a storm, even if there are no clouds. You hear whispers. Old ones. That Enoch, yes, the same Enoch who walked with God and never died, was taken up again. This time, not to stay. This time, with a message. He speaks not to humans, but to the watchers, the ones who came down, the ones who made the mistake. And he tells them, it's too late. No forgiveness, no second chance, no redemption. Your children, they have to go. Your names, they will be cursed. You will be bound in the earth, beneath it, far from sky and song, until the day all things are judged. You can imagine the silence after that. Imagine a being made of light, realizing it will never see light again. The watchers are taken, chained, buried. And their children? Well, that's when the rain begins again. Not a cleansing this time, not a new beginning. A burial. You feel the water rise around your ankles, then your knees, then your neck. The Nephilim rage against it, some say. Others say they laughed, even as the sea swallowed their voices. It doesn't matter. Because after that, there are no more footsteps that make the earth tremble. No more voices that echo without sound. Just water and silence. And above it all, a sky that has stopped watching. The water dries again. You're standing on solid ground, but something under your feet doesn't feel right. It's not the mud, not the damp. It's something older, something in the bones of the world. Because even though the giants are gone, or at least buried, people still talk about them, quietly, but always with that look, the one that says, you know, don't you, that they never really left. You start hearing the name again, not shouted, not taught, just mentioned, in passing. A traveler says he saw a man lift an ox cart alone, says the man's great-uncle had strange eyes, says they were from the hills. Someone else says they heard voices underground, where the watchers were buried, chained angels dreaming of stars they'll never see again. But the people who speak the most carefully, the ones who know the scriptures, they say something different. They say the giants will return. Maybe not the same ones, not the same faces, but something like them. You start hearing names again. Og, the king whose bed was made of iron. Anak, father of sons taller than memory. Goliath, who mocked heaven until a stone shut his mouth. You're not sure what's real anymore. And maybe that's the point. Because somewhere between history and prophecy, between memory and myth, the Nephilim keep walking. And just when you think they've vanished completely, one of the later scrolls flickers with a familiar phrase. In the letters of Peter, and in the tiny book of Jude. They speak of angels who sinned, of spirits in prison, of beings held in chains until the final day. And you feel something shift in your chest, because you remember what happened the last time the chains were broken. You move from one land to the next, cross a river, follow a mountain path, drift through ruins where no one lives anymore. And still, they whisper. Not in Hebrew this time, not in any language you recognize, but the stories are the same. You find an old man carving stones in a cave near the sea. He doesn't speak much, but he gestures to a broken wall, smooth, impossibly tall, and shrugs. Built by the old ones, he says, then goes back to his hammer. You ask someone in a different valley why the statues here all have long arms and strange eyes. She smiles like she's answering a child. They were kings, she says. Then her face darkens. Before the kings we know. You travel farther. You find new names. new shapes. In Mesopotamia, they speak of Gilgamesh, part god, part man, two-thirds divine. He ruled. He conquered. He wandered the world looking for immortality. In Greece, you hear about titans, massive beings cast into the underworld by younger gods, not evil exactly, just too big for the world that came after them. In Canaan, the word Rephaim still circles in the wind. Sometimes it means giants. Other times, spirits of the dead. No one agrees on the details, but no one says they were small. And here's the strange thing. None of these people ever met. Not the shepherds from Bashan, not the poets of Uruk, not the temple priests of Athens. And yet, they all remember giants. Something about that should make you feel small, but it doesn't. It makes you feel watched. You settle down one evening near a place no one lives anymore. The wind is sharp here, but the stars are clear. You find carvings on the rocks, crude, ancient, figures with long limbs, holding spheres or suns or weapons you don't recognize. At their feet are smaller people, bent or kneeling, and above them, a shape, not quite human, not quite anything. You don't know what it means, but someone, long ago, thought it mattered. Someone took the time to chip it into stone, to leave it here, under open sky, for you to find. And you wonder, were they afraid of giants, or were they mourning them? You find yourself near a chapel built into the side of a cliff. No one worships there anymore, but the stone is warm, and the wind passing through the cracks sounds almost like breathing. Inside, there's writing, not in Hebrew, not Greek, Latin, a scrap of a sermon maybe, the ink long faded, but the warning is still there. The angels who did not keep their proper place. You don't need the rest. You already know the story. The early church didn't forget the Nephilim. They just repackaged them. They didn't talk about giants the way the old stories did. They talked about what caused them, about rebellion, about angels who fell not in flame, but in fascination. You walk through dusty libraries, voices echoing in stone halls, and you hear the same names come up again and again. Augustine, Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Tertullian. Some believed the sons of God were just the descendants of Seth, righteous men who made the mistake of marrying into the line of Cain. Others weren't so sure. They pointed to Jude, to 2 Peter, to ancient scrolls and oral traditions, and they whispered what Enoch had already screamed, that some angels had crossed a line, and that the flood was only a temporary fix. Some went even further. They said that the spirits of the Nephilim, the ones drowned in the flood, didn't leave, couldn't leave, that they became something else. Unclean spirits, wanderers, what we now call demons. You hear one writer say it plainly. The bodies of the giants were destroyed, but their souls became evil spirits upon the earth. And suddenly, the New Testament sounds different to you. The man possessed by a legion, the boy who foams at the mouth, the herds of pigs, the shrieking, begging voices that say, "Do not send us into the abyss." And for the first time, you wonder, what exactly were they? Some in the early church believed that, at the end of days, the fallen ones would rise again, not with flesh, but with influence, that the Nephilim wouldn't come back walking on two legs, cracking trees with their fists, but through lies, power, deception. They would rise in rulers who defy heaven, in wars that scorch the earth, in arrogance that tries once again to build towers to the sky. And in one man, they said, the last one, the Antichrist, a being of great power, of strange heritage, of terrible persuasion. Some whispered that he would be a descendant, a spiritual heir of the Nephilim, and that when he rises, the world will remember. Not just what was lost, but what was never supposed to be found again. You leave the chapel, or maybe it leaves you. It's hard to tell with places like that, places that feel like they're remembering something heavier than stone should carry. You keep walking. The ground is warm again, the stars quiet, and for a while you don't hear the name. Not the giants, not the watchers, not the old children of old mistakes, but something about the world feels louder. It's not that people are taller or stronger. It's not that the mountains are moving. It's that people have started talking like they know more than they should. They name themselves gods. They build towers. They study the skies not to wonder, but to command. And deep in your chest, that old weight stirs again. Because you've seen this before. You pass a statue of a king whose eyes are too blank, too confident. The plaque says nothing about giants. But you know the look. It's the look of someone who thinks the flood will never come for him. You meet a man who speaks too many languages, and none of them kindly. You ask where he's from. He says, everywhere, and smiles like someone who's never had to kneel. You see a woman lead thousands with a voice that bends the air. People say she was born under strange lights. Others say she wasn't born at all. No one says the word Nephilim. Not anymore. But you can feel it in your teeth. You hear talk of a final day, of wars that won't end, of kings with no mercy, of knowledge too great to be contained in books. And beneath all the sermons and scrolls and warnings, one idea keeps echoing like a footstep from far away. That the end will look like the beginning. That the sins of heaven's sons won't stay buried. That what came down once might come again. Not in the same form, not in bodies too large for doorways, but in minds, in ideas, in rulers who stare too long at the stars, and in people who decide that heaven doesn't get to say no anymore. You lie down one night under a sky that looks too wide, and you think about everything that's been forgotten, and everything that refuses to stay that way. You think about chains under mountains, and bones under rivers, and eyes that never closed. You wonder if maybe none of this ever stopped. Maybe the Nephilim were never just giants. Maybe they were the echo of a choice, the choice to reach too far. And maybe, just maybe, someone's reaching again. You wake up one morning in a world full of machines. The birds still sing. The wind still moves the trees, but something's different. There are screens now, wires, satellites watching the sky. People send voices through the air and forget they're doing something miraculous. No one talks about giants anymore. Not in public, not seriously. But they haven't vanished. They've just moved somewhere quieter, into pages, into whispers, into the corners of the internet where the fonts are always too red. You walk through a bookstore and see it on a shelf, a thick paperback with an old painting on the front. Swords, fire, swords, fire, men with too many muscles. The title says Nephilim. You open it. There they are again, only now they wear leather jackets. They fight demons. Or become them. You laugh, softly, and put the book back. But later that night, you wonder why they're still here. You scroll past a video, late at night. The voice says the giants are buried under Antarctica, that the Smithsonian hid the bones, that angel blood runs through world leaders, that a tower in Geneva opens portals to where the watchers still wait. You shake your head. But you don't scroll away just yet, because something in the story feels older than the screen it's on. You remember the statues, the hills, the names carved into stone no one visits anymore, and you wonder, what if people aren't inventing these stories? What if they're just remembering them poorly? You pass by a church built of glass. Inside, a preacher speaks of prophecy, of final days, of fallen ones who rise again through power, through pride, through bloodlines no one can trace. You don't hear the word Nephilim, but it's in the room, between the verses, between the fear and the hope. You leave before the choir sings. And now you walk through cities lit by electricity and shaped by people who've forgotten what mountains used to fear. No one builds walls to keep out giants anymore, but the buildings, they're getting taller, and the men inside them, they speak like they've never read Genesis 6. But something in their eyes says they've lived it. You sit down beneath a tree that isn't ancient, but tries to be. The sun is low. The wind hums through the branches, like it's trying to remember the right tune. And for the first time in a long while, you stop walking. You've been chasing the Nephilim through time, through myth, through scripture and silence, and now they're behind you, or above, or somewhere else entirely. But you still feel them in the questions you haven't asked out loud, in the way your skin prickles when someone tells a story that starts with long ago. You close your eyes, and you wonder, why do we need giants? It's not just about size, not really. Not about how tall they were or how many trees they stepped on. It's about the weight. Giants are the weight of things that should not be. Desire that crossed the line. Power that forgot its limits. Knowledge handed to hands, not ready to hold it. The Nephilim were what happened when heaven fell in love with earth and refused to let go. And maybe that's why they've never quite left our stories, because we still don't know what to do with the things we want that we're not supposed to have. We still build towers, still name ourselves kings, still look at stars and say, I want that. Maybe that's why the story stays with us, not because it was about monsters, but because it was about us. You, me, all of us. Making the same mistakes. Reaching too far. Loving too much or too carelessly. Choosing what feels good over what is right. Thinking we can carry the weight of heaven without breaking our backs. We can't. That's what the Nephilim remind us. They weren't just giants. They were consequences. Tall enough to cast shadows across the centuries. You lie back. The tree creaks. The air cools. You listen for footsteps in the distance. But there are none. Not tonight. Tonight it's just you and the earth, and the slow exhale of a world still learning how to carry its mistakes, still waiting for the flood to dry. The sky is darker now, but not heavy, just quiet. The kind of quiet that happens after everyone said what they needed to say. The tree above you creaks once, like it's shifting in its sleep. And you realize you've been holding this story for a long time. Not just today, not just tonight, for generations. Because that's what the Nephilim are, really. Not monsters, not myths, memory. They're the shape our ancestors gave to the fear of too much power. The sound of the ground when it remembers what it used to carry. The ache in the sky when something leaves heaven without permission. And maybe they're the part of us that still wishes we were allowed to reach that high. You lie on your side. The earth is firm, the wind soft. You think back. to the watchers who came down, to the children who grew too fast, to the angels who cried when judgment fell. You think about what they built, what they broke, what they left. And then, slowly, you stop thinking, because there's nothing left to chase. Not tonight. The giants are gone. The flood has passed. And you're just breathing. You travel for a long time without meaning to. Not on horseback, not with wheels, just your feet, your thoughts. And that slow pull forward, the one that says, there's still more to see. The land flattens into open fields, then rises again. The air cools, then warms, then cools again. You don't ask where you are anymore. The places tell you in other ways, in the way the wind feels older than the sky, in the way people lower their voices when you mention certain names, and in the stones, always the stones. You find yourself in a hill country, the kind of place where the grass grows thick over things it wasn't meant to cover. You pass through a village with no name, just 7 homes and a field no one plows. A boy leads you to it, not because you asked, just because he wanted to. There's something here, he says. Come see. You follow him past the edge of the fence, past the line where the wind shifts, and there, just under the earth, a shape, a stone. Too straight to be natural, too large to be local. You kneel, brush away a layer of dirt. It's smooth. Too smooth. People say it was part of a wall, the boy says, but it's deeper now. The ground's been growing over it for years. You ask who built it. He shrugs. The strong ones, before we kept names. He runs off laughing. You stay, and the stone hums beneath your hand. Weeks pass, or maybe only days. You follow riverbeds, camp near fig trees, let your skin turn gold under sun and ash under wind. And then, just when your legs begin to ache the right amount, you arrive at Baalbek. They don't call it that here. They just call it the platform. It's too big to ignore, too perfect to explain. A terrace of megaliths, stones longer than buses, heavier than belief. Someone hands you water, points to the lowest row. They were here before we were. You ask who they were. He doesn't answer, just gives you a look, the kind people give when they think you already know. You spend the night beside one of the stones. It doesn't shift, doesn't crack, doesn't cool. It's like sleeping next to memory. From there, the road changes again. Now the trees get taller. You climb for days, through forest paths and hanging mist. You reach a stone circle, not famous, not fenced, just there. One of the locals offers to show you the carvings. You nod. He doesn't smile. They were kings, he says, but not like ours, too tall, too proud, too many teeth. You think he's joking, until he lifts his shirt and shows you the mark on his shoulder. A spiral. He says nothing else. You find a boat, or the boat finds you. You cross water that tastes like salt and storm. The island is small. No one lives here now. But once someone did. Someone with chisels, or maybe claws. Dozens of statues. Faces turned to the sea. Eyes wide open, lips sealed. The place feels like it's watching you back. Someone whispers the word giants. You don't ask who said it. You just nod. And still, you walk. Through deserts now, endless red, endless hush. At night, you dream of voices arguing over what the sky means. In the morning, you find drawings on canyon walls, Men with wings, beasts with crowns, and one tall figure standing in the middle of them all. The drawings are old, but not faded. You end up in highlands. They don't have roads here, only trails. You meet a woman who trades you boiled roots for a story. You ask if she's heard of the old ones. She doesn't answer, just points to the cave behind her house. You enter. It's shallow at first, then deeper, then quiet. On the walls, carvings again, tall ones, not just in size but in posture, hands raised, palms open, eyes blank. You recognize the pose, not praise, command. You run your fingers over the stone, and in that moment, you realize something. You haven't been traveling, you've been following. And the things you're following, they walked this earth a very long time ago. You leave the highlands slowly, not because your feet hurt, but because you're not sure the next place will be quieter. But eventually, the hills fall behind you, and the wind changes, again and again, like it's leading you somewhere, like it wants to show you not what the giants were, but what they knew. You arrive at a place where no one talks, not because they can't, but because they've seen too much. They watch you with eyes that seem to ask, "Why are you still looking?" And then, one man, older than most stones it seems, takes you to a pit. It's shallow, lined with ash. At the bottom are fragments, glass, blackened bones, a melted tool. "They weren't supposed to give us fire," he says. Then he walks away. You start to hear the stories. Not loud, not official, not carved into temple walls, but passed down like curses disguised as bedtime prayers. They say the Watchers didn't just take wives. They shared things, secrets, techniques, knowledge too sharp to carry safely. One taught how to forge blades, another how to enchant them. One revealed how to pull stars into charts, another how to draw power from their alignment. One showed how to paint the face in ways that summon attention. Another taught how to twist roots into poison. You wonder at first why any of this would matter. Then you see the fields littered with broken spears, and the women whose eyes know how to end an argument without raising a voice, and the scrolls, pages and pages of symbols too symmetrical to be human. You spend the night in a village where they still hide iron beneath floorboards. "They taught us how to make it," a woman says, "but not how to forget it." You ask her what she means. She lights a flame on the tip of her thumb and smiles. Then she puts it out. "I was just showing you," she says, "not giving." You start to understand. The Nephilim were the children, but it was the Watchers who planted the tree. The giants broke the world with weight, but their fathers bent it with knowledge. You feel the ground differently now, like it's still remembering the shape of certain words, like even the silence has secrets it doesn't trust you with. Someone tells you a story before sleep about a man who learned to speak to animals, about a woman who could turn sickness around just by humming. They say those gifts came from them, from the ones who taught too much. You ask what happened to the man and woman. They were buried, the storyteller says, not because they sinned, because we did. You lie in the dark, and the stars don't twinkle. They burn, like they're watching. And suddenly, you're not sure if it was kindness or cruelty that they ever came down at all. You sleep beneath the stars that night. The fire burns low. The wind wraps around your ankles like a blanket. But something isn't sleeping. Something in the air feels unsettled, not dangerous, just awake, like the story hasn't stopped moving, even though your eyes are closed. You think about the Watchers, the Nephilim, the things they taught, the things they built, the weight they left behind. And then you think about what happens when something that large dies, and you realize not everything that falls stays down. They say when the flood came, the giants drowned like everything else. Some fought, some laughed, some begged, but all of them sank. The bodies were broken, that much is certain, but the spirits, well, no one quite agrees on what happened next. Some say they vanished, some say they rose, but the oldest stories say they stayed, not in flesh, not in bone, but in shadow. You begin to hear it in villages, little things, a child who wakes screaming at the same hour each night, a traveler who speaks languages he was never taught, a woman who sees too much and forgets how to blink. No one says demon, not right away. They say things like restless, touched, carrying something that isn't theirs. But then someone mentions the old ones, and everyone goes quiet. You hear the idea spoken clearly only once, by a man who lives alone by a salt lake. He doesn't greet you, doesn't ask your name. He just says, "They weren't made right, those sons of heaven. When their children died, they couldn't go up. They weren't allowed." You wait. He continues. So now they wander, not in bodies, in storms, in fever dreams, in bad choices. Then he looks at you, eyes heavy with knowing. We call them demons, but they were born Nephilim. You don't sleep easily that night, not from fear, but from recognition, because you felt that presence before. In places where no one should be angry, but the air still growls. In decisions that didn't feel like yours, but you made them anyway. In stories people won't tell, but can't forget. You walk through a city one morning where everyone's too tired. Not hungry, not sick, just worn. And someone says, the wells are full, the fields are fine, but the dreams are wrong. Something's breathing under this place, an old man tells you, and we've forgotten its name. But you haven't. Not anymore. You keep walking. Not because you're looking for answers now. You've stopped expecting those. You walk because the story is still unfolding under your feet. And you've started to notice something. The places that once felt empty, they feel full, but not of people, of watching. And just when you think you've reached the last of it, the final silence, someone says something that chills you more than any scream ever could. It's starting again. They say the end will look like the beginning, not all at once, not in fire and trumpets and skies ripped open, but slowly, quietly, like the return of something long buried, not in the ground, but in the heart. You hear the signs described like rumors. Men of power rising up, speaking words no one questions. Knowledge spreading too fast, too deep, faster than wisdom can keep up. Nations moving like they're being pulled by strings made of gold and fear. And then you hear the old word again, whispered. Nephilim. Not walking this time, not smashing stones or building cities too tall, but thinking, whispering. taking shape in the pride of kings and the hunger of empires. You pass through towns where leaders are worshipped, not respected, worshipped. You sit in crowds where voices shout louder than conscience. And you wonder if this is what they meant. Not a giant rising from the sea, but something taller than truth standing on two polished legs, wearing a suit and smiling. You remember the flood. Not the water, exactly, but the reason it came. The world had become filled with violence. That was the line in the story. Not sin, not mistakes, violence. And when you look around now, you start to wonder, are we filling the world again? You hear talk of a final king, a false one, someone who will rise at the end, with answers, with charm, with something in his blood that makes him more than man, and less. Some say he'll be descended from giants. Others say he'll be worse, the idea of giants reborn in ambition. You don't know if you believe it, but your bones do. You sleep near a temple once. No one uses it anymore, but you dream of eyes watching you from behind its walls, not cruel, just waiting. When you wake, there's dew on the stones. You touch one. It's warm, like the presence never left, like it's been waiting for the right time. You sit for a while, not because you're tired, but because you've gone as far as you can, without looking inward. The story stretches behind you like a long shadow, taller than memory. And still, something in it feels unfinished. Not because you missed a part, but because it never really ends. That's the strange thing about stories like this. You don't carry them like books. You carry them like dreams. Heavy in places, soft in others. Parts missing, parts repeated. Names you forget, and still feel. You can't explain why you remember them, why they stay. You only know that they do. You close your eyes, and you picture the Nephilim again. Not towering, not roaring, just standing, watching, the way the past sometimes does. You think about the angels who came down, the humans who said yes, the children who became too much. You think about the watchers and who watched them. You think about the flood and how strange it is that even after a cleansing that deep, the memory still rises like mist. You hear a voice, your own, maybe, asking, why did we keep this story? We could have forgotten it, buried it, said it was too strange, too vague, too uncomfortable. But we didn't. We kept it, in scripture, in ruins, in shadows, not because we needed giants, but maybe because we needed the warning that there are things too big to hold, things too tempting to resist, knowledge too sharp, power too beautiful, and that sometimes what we call a curse started as a gift, given at the wrong time. The Nephilim weren't just giants. They were reminders of what happens when we forget who we are and who we aren't, of what happens when something from heaven tries to live on earth without becoming human. You open your eyes. It takes a moment to realize you're not in the past anymore. There's no desert wind, no stone walls, no voices whispering in forgotten dialects. You're back where the lights hum softly behind walls, and your feet rest on floors that don't remember who built them. But something in your chest still echoes with dust and starlight. The story hasn't left. It's followed you here. You sit up slowly, as if waking from a dream that still lingers in the corners of the room. And as your eyes adjust to the world around you, you notice it. Not giants walking in the streets, not Nephilim standing at crosswalks or sitting on trains, but their shape is here. You feel it in the way things move, in the way people speak, in the silence between all the noise. You see it in the towers, the glass ones that stretch toward the sky like they're trying to break through it. They don't carry names like Anak or Og, but the pride behind them, the desire to rise, to dominate, to be unchallenged, it's the same. You walk beneath them, and it feels like you've seen this before, not just the height, the hunger. It shows up in other places too. In the way we speak of progress, like it's salvation. In the way we celebrate those who take more than they give. In the way we crown influencers and billionaires, not because of their goodness, but because of their reach. You remember what it felt like to live in the shadow of giants, that quiet fear, that quiet envy, that quiet hope that maybe one day you could be one too. No one says Nephilim anymore. But the world is still obsessed with power that shouldn't belong to mortals. We don't worship strength openly, but we measure it, we envy it, we build machines that carry it, we write stories where it wins. We invent tools to stretch our reach, to see further, to live longer, to become more than human. The only thing that's changed is the language. And when someone stands too tall, when their influence becomes something you can feel in the air, we don't call them giants. We just call them unstoppable. You walk through a world that calls itself connected. Devices speak to each other. Faces glow in screens. Knowledge is no longer passed down through generations. It's streamed, saved, indexed, sold. You don't need a prophet to show you the stars anymore. You can carry them in your pocket. It's strange, isn't it? In the ancient stories, the Watchers taught the stars, the roots, the forging of blades. They gave too much too soon. They crossed a boundary they weren't supposed to, and for that, the world changed. Now we teach ourselves. But the hunger behind it hasn't changed at all. You think about the machines we've built, about the algorithms that know your face better than your own mirror, about the systems that study what you love, what you hate, what you'll do next, all without asking your permission. You wonder how many people have handed their thoughts to something they don't understand. Not out of trust, but out of habit. Because everyone else is doing it. Because that's just what life looks like now. And in that quiet realization, you start to feel it again. That old shape. It's not standing in a field or ruling from a stone throne. It's woven into the wires, written into the data, etched into the language of endless progress. You're not living in a world built by Nephilim, but it wouldn't surprise you if some part of their spirit slipped through the cracks, riding waves of signal instead of thunder. After all, they were beings born from a collision between heaven and earth, from a moment where something divine reached too far into human flesh. Isn't that what we're chasing now? Something more than human, something untouchable, something that knows everything. We don't call it worship, we call it innovation. But when people gather in silence to watch a screen glow, to hear a voice that's not a voice, speak answers that feel like prophecy, what else would you call it? The Nephilim may have died in water, but their story survived in code, and we're still learning how to use what they should never have given. You keep walking. The cities blur behind you, the signals fade to a hum. And yet, you still feel it. The reach. It's in the headlines now. In the promises of minds that dream of machines that never sleep, bodies that never die. We've stopped building pyramids for the dead. Now we build servers. Now we upload memory. Now we try to trap time itself in silicone and steel. You pass a billboard that talks about age reversal. Another promises that one day you'll be able to live forever. Maybe not here, maybe in the cloud, maybe in a cloned body, maybe just in the trace of your choices, left behind for a machine to echo. It doesn't sound so different from the old stories. The Nephilim lived long lives, grew large, made names for themselves. But it wasn't enough. It never is. There's always one more barrier to break, one more rule to rewrite, one more line between the divine and the human, and someone willing to step over it. You see it everywhere, not in giants, but in that quiet voice behind so many decisions that says, you can become more, stronger, smarter, untouchable, that you can remake yourself, not in the image of God, but in the image of your will. We don't kneel at altars anymore, but we follow influencers like prophets. We don't sacrifice animals, but we offer our attention. We don't call it eternity, but we scroll like we're afraid the story might stop if we ever look away. And deep down, you feel the same thing that ancient people must have felt when they saw one of the Nephilim walk past. The thrill of being near something too large, too fast, too unexplainable. The fear and the quiet envy. What if you could be like that? What if the story wasn't just something you inherited? What if it was something you could finish? You realize we don't fear the Nephilim anymore. We're trying to become them. You pause at the edge of a city, not ancient, not ruined, not anything dramatic, just normal. Rows of homes, wires overhead, screens glowing behind curtains, people moving in quiet patterns, and yet the feeling is the same. You remember what it felt like to walk through the land of the giants, the way the stones tilted slightly under their weight, the way people didn't speak above a whisper, the way everything felt like it had been made to serve something taller than you. Now it's concrete and glass instead of stone. Now the giants don't roar, they negotiate, they build platforms, they launch initiatives, but the feeling, that feeling of smallness, is still there. You see it in the industries that grow faster than anyone can regulate, in the companies that influence elections without ever appearing on a ballot, in the leaders who are followed not because they're wise, but because they are loud and endless. You realize that Nephilim don't need to be 9 feet tall anymore. They just need to be everywhere at once. You remember that the original story wasn't about size, it was about influence, and influence has never been bigger than it is now. There are names you can't avoid, symbols you can't unsee, systems you can't opt out of. They don't ask for loyalty, they assume it. And what happens to a world where systems grow taller than the people they're meant to serve, where the platforms shape the people, not the other way around, where the giants aren't men, but networks? You think of the old kings, the ones who built fortified cities and giant walls, and you realize we've done the same thing, only now the walls are invisible, and we live inside them willingly. You've heard the flood described as judgment, but maybe it was mercy. Maybe it was the world being reset before it cracked completely. And you wonder, not in fear, just in stillness, what kind of flood it would take now, and if we'd even see it coming. You keep walking, not through ruins now, but through the ordinary, a parking lot, a hallway, a quiet evening street where the streetlights buzz just a little too loudly. The old story hasn't disappeared, it's just wearing new clothes. You've stopped looking for giants, not because they're gone, but because you've realized they don't announce themselves anymore. They don't stomp, they suggest, they trend, they recommend. They shift culture like a hand beneath the surface of water, subtle, invisible, undeniable. And in that realization, something in you finally settles. You're not helpless in this world, but you are small, and maybe that's not a curse. Maybe that's what the giants never understood. That being small isn't failure, that not knowing everything isn't weakness, that being mortal, fragile, temporary, limited, is not something to escape. It's something to carry gently. You stop walking, you sit. No one's watching. No voice speaks from above. Just wind passing through trees like a quiet reminder that not everything powerful has to be loud. You think of the watchers, of their desire to teach what wasn't meant to be taught, of their children who outgrew the world. And you think of now, of us, still reaching, still building, still learning how to carry what we were never meant to hold alone. The story doesn't end, but it does quiet. You close your eyes, not to forget, but to rest. You've seen the shape of the story. You've seen it rise and fall and rise again in new forms. And now, you let it go. Not because it's over, but because you know your place in it. You're not here to be a giant. You're here to remember what happens when we try, and to choose something smaller, something truer, something human. You lie back. The stars are still above you. The world is still turning. But for now, you don't need to reach. You don't need to ask. You just breathe, and you sleep.